Let's move to Fort Mill, School District York 4, up in the upper part of the state. Today, we've got from Fort Mill, we have Megan Gray, who is the Director of Attendance Interventions. We've got Celestine Peters, who is the counselor at Catawba Ridge High School. And we've got Dr. Emily McQuay, who is the principal at Fort Mill Middle School. So we've got a little different perspective here from these folks. Fort Mill, and when I saw this data, I did a double take. Fort Mill, whereas the state had in 2020-21 had a 20% plus chronic absentee rate, Fort Mill had a 7% chronic absentee rate. They pulled the state average way down. So something really good going on up there in Fort Mill. They've got about 17,000 students. They got a number of schools. It's a growing area of South Carolina. And so let's have these folks. I'm going to start out with Megan. Megan, we just make sure we got everybody on the screen here. We do. Thank you, Thomas. Megan, from the central office perspective, tell us about you guys shut down in March of 2020. We all did a quick shutdown and went into a little panic mode there. And then we tried to do school. How did you guys do it? What happened between 2020 and now?
That's right. So, like everyone else in the state, we closed down for the end of the 19 to 20 school year. And then when we came back in August of 2020, we were on an alternating schedule. So like an A day, B day for elementary school students. That was only for 4 weeks. We were able to develop some policies and procedures within the school building to minimize the time that students were transitioning in the building. They were having lunch in their classroom. So we were able to feel comfortable with bringing students back and minimizing exposure within the building. I think for a lot of our families, the younger kids are the ones that are a little bit more difficult to manage when they're at home all day and families are trying to work from home as well. So we really made it a priority to bring back the younger students more consistently, all day, every day. Our middle and high school students were on an alternating A day, B day rotation through, I think it was March of that school year. And as Kelly was mentioning before, the community, or I can't remember if it was Kelly or Michelle, sorry. The community kind of stepped up. There was a number of churches and different organizations that were providing tutoring and support for particularly middle school students that were home every other day. We also had a virtual academy, and I want to say it was somewhere about 6,000 students when we started in the year 2020, 21. And they were committed to staying in the virtual academy for the entire school year or semester at the high school level. We definitely worked with families that were struggling perhaps in the modality that they chose, whether it was in the virtual academy or the in-person school setting. If a need came up or if something changed, we were working with them to best determine the plan for transitioning to the other, and trying to help them understand that it's in the best interest of the student to have some consistency, so we weren't flip-flopping back and forth between the two different programs. And then when we opened in 2021, we were all day, every day for a number of students. We had a robust COVID response team that worked with families to identify, ways that they could report if a student was not feeling well, or if there was an exposure in the family or in the school setting. We had some consistent procedures, and so families knew what to expect in that regard. And I think overall, from my perspective at the district level, early on, we were doing a lot of just wellness checks on students, making sure, that if we hadn't seen or heard from them in a while, that we were doing everything to exhaust all possible ways of getting in touch with them. And I did a lot of, door knocks to just check in and make sure everyone is feeling, okay, and understands what the expectations are. I think that one of the things that I do as well from the district level is just trying to connect the pieces. So if we have an elementary school student and a high school student, that we can identify that they're from the same family, and that I can serve as the conduit for the district as a whole to make sure that they understand communication. And I think that overall, with respect to coming back from the COVID closure, our staff was pretty engaged in wanting to support students and provide virtual learning as necessary. There were a couple of times where we needed to close down an entire school just because of the number of cases that were there. And my son's school shut down last year for a couple of weeks, and it was a pretty seamless transition. They were following the same daily schedule. Students knew what to expect, parents knew what to expect. And so I think that that really helped us too when we were transitioning, from being in person to virtual as necessary.
Megan, from your perspective, did you see any shift in the community population, the adult population's attitudes toward attendance?
I think so. Kind of connecting to the question that Renee had earlier, just the families that were in the virtual environment, they had a little more flexibility on where they were going to do their learning from, whether it was, from the community or from, a different location. I think that as long as you were doing what you needed to do and you were coming back to us here in Fort Mill, we were able to, continue to allow students to continue to learn and experience school through that. I think that one of the biggest issues that we're tackling is just overall mental health of students, and that's something that I don't think has necessarily been brought up yet. And I think that Emily and Celeste can definitely speak to that a little bit more from the school level, but just helping families understand that there might be some anxiety, or there might be some additional concerns about just reintegrating into society and being back to living in person. And we definitely solidified a lot of our homebound procedures for families that might need that. We were definitely working to make sure that we were easing folks back into things as necessary. But trying to continue to maintain with families that it's important that you commit to the format for learning that you have chosen, and that the expectations were clear as to what the next steps would be for them.
You bring up a good point with the mental health thing. Think about this for a minute. I would be willing to bet that there's more than one student in South Carolina who somewhere in the last couple of years had a bad dream that a parent or a friend died of COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about that from a kid's perspective, particularly a young kid, and then think about how that would affect their behavior and their perceptions, and maybe their attendance or their willingness to attend. That had to happen somewhere, and we can't ignore that. Let's switch over to Dr. McQuay for a minute. Dr. McQuay, you're the principal of Fort Mill Middle School.
Yes, sir.
Tell us about your middle school and what you experienced.
Sure. So I have a little bit of a unique perspective because I was the director of the virtual academy, and then I became the principal of Fort Mill Middle School. So I experienced a gamut of things over the last couple of years. But Fort Mill Middle, now that we are back in school and here every day, like Megan mentioned, the main thing that we're seeing is just that mental health piece that we're really helping the kids through. We have a lot of anxiety. We have a lot of kids that are struggling to want to be in the building every day. And it's a lot of different factors, I think, that have played into that. But we're also seeing just a shift in how they talk to each other and interact with each other. And so we're working through that as well. And I think that's a big piece of whether a kid comes to school or not. If they're worried about being bullied or worried about someone not being so nice to them when they get to the building, then they're not going to want to come to school. So that's really what we've been focusing on this school year is, the social emotional piece and building community within each homeroom and having morning meetings, which typically don't happen in middle school, but we adopted that. Right now we're all for our one book, one school selection. We've been reading a book about bullying. So we're just doing a lot of different things to help try to get the kids comfortable to be in the building and want to come here every day and feel like they have an adult in the building. If they did not already, that's their person that they can go to when they need something.
Emily, most of us probably have a pretty strong perception that middle school is where the big behavior issues are. Middle school is, I know I spent my whole education career trying to get around middle schools and not work in one because I just did not understand the behavior. It's a challenge. When the kids came back, did you see any behavioral issues or changes that you could notice?
Yeah, absolutely. Just the not knowing how to speak to each other or saying things to another person that you would never say in person prior to COVID. They had that experience of being behind a computer screen and they thought they could just talk to each other any old kind of way. And it's not really that way when you're in person. And so just working through that with them. And, that's what we've been modeling with them every day and giving them different scenarios to work through. And we've been doing that every morning in our morning meetings so far this school year, trying to help build those soft skills back up in them.
Okay. Emily, I'll put you on the spot for a second.
Right.
Can you think of an example of a staff member who did something really that helped attendance in some situation?
Well, I mean, we've had a lot of staff members that have driven to people's homes over COVID. That really was just what we had to do. The three of us that are on this panel all did it. It's just something our counselors did, the administrators did, our district office staff, our teachers, we all just kind of committed that we're just going to be persistent and diligent and just do every single thing we can to get these kids to come to school. And if they didn't respond to our phone calls or our letters, we drove to the house. If we couldn't find them at the house, we one of the suggestions I was going to have, we set up Google Voice accounts so that we could text the parent, but then they wouldn't have our cell phone number. Mm-hmm. They would just have the Google Voice number, so that, because sometimes they would respond to text when they wouldn't respond to call. I mean, we just tried to think outside of the box and get in touch with them any way that we possibly could. We would call a friend to the office and say, can you please just give me the cell phone number for Johnny so that I can call him and just check on him, since his mom won't answer the phone. We just did anything we could to reach out and get in touch with those kids and show them that we cared about them and we wanted them here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Emily. We appreciate that. Does someone have a comment or question before I go forward? Okay. Celestine, let's come to the high school for a minute. You're a high school counselor.
Yes.
I empathize with you. I'm recovering from that position from some years back. But you're there. You're the counselor at Catawba. Well, you're at Catawba Ridge High School. Yes. Tell us about Catawba Ridge and what did you see about attendance when you guys came back?
So last year, I actually took the place of Emily when she left the virtual program, and I became the program lead. And I found it was just maybe a small percentage of the student population that struggled with attendance. So we just took the overall approach is understanding the need and then supporting whatever that need was, whether it was they needed a device, if they needed a hotspot, if we had to go to the house. We had teachers who certain students connected with better than others that would call and reach out. Did a number of things that might not be in the comfort level of others, but we did everything we could to try to figure out why that student was having a difficult time coming to school. Sometimes when you dig a little deeper, you understand the outside circumstances that are going on. And when you support those circumstances, it changes their direction and it might cause them to want to come to school. We had students who parents, especially in the virtual world, pretty much the kids were there almost essentially on their own. And that's something you might not hear from a student, but when you go out to the house, you discover these things and then you try to do what you can to show the love, care, and concern to help support them. So I think coming back to the high school and now being in person, some of the things that I've seen that I think has helped out, we contact students after they've been out the third day. We call and figure out, okay, why aren't you here? What's going on? And it could be something simple. Sorry. My light went off. Something simple where they don't understand the processes of turning in that excuse you went to the doctor. So communicating the procedures of what you're supposed to do when you're out is very important, because oftentimes the parent or the student may not do that because they just don't know or don't think it's very important. And that's important to share with us why you are out, so that we can tell you this is what you need to do so it won't count against you, or so it won't affect you, or so you can make up the work. And I do deal with a lot of students who are very anxious, especially the ones who are virtual and now are being told you have to come back to the building. Talk to some kids literally every other day, some pulling them out of their car from crying because they don't want to come into the building, walking them to class, checking in on them, to figure out what's the best plan to get them through the day when it comes to school. So again, I just think it's very important to understand the need and support whatever that need is in the best way that you can. And then having the support of the district office has been very key.
Absolutely.
To the schools, meet with the assistant principals, talk to us. We just keep the communication going amongst the schools and the district to make sure we're doing everything we can to support our students who are struggling with attendance.
Celestine, you're there as the counselor at the high school. Did you see any students? Did you lose any students that just sort of took the opportunity during the shutdown to disappear?
I would say that we met weekly to talk about those kids who may have sort of disappeared. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes we figured out where they were at, got the district involved. Because they were virtual last year, we had a device that could track them because they use our devices. So most cases we figured out where the students were where they ended up. And if we couldn't find them, we pushed it to the district level. But in almost every case, we figured out where the student ended up. And then we did lose some students in terms of not wanting to come back in person. A small selected group of families decided to seek other options because coming back to school was just not something that they wanted to do, which is, fine. We supported that. We actually provided to the families when we learned that the virtual program was going to come to an end. We provided them alternate options just so they know that there are other options out there. Don't just stop coming to school. Explore these options in virtual if that's what you want to do. Here's the list for you. And we kind of help them get that initiated.
Have you all totally ended the virtual option now?
Yes.
Okay. How would you compare the success of students in a virtual instruction academically versus the face-to-face now that you have?
I would say about 20% of the kids struggled out of all the kids who attended last year. I can only speak from last year. A small number did struggle. And uniquely with high school, you have the block scheduling. So for some of those kids who just couldn't handle it, we sent them back to in-person. And then we received some kids from in-person to virtual that still struggled. So I would say it was a small number. And one thing that I think Michelle mentioned about making it fun, I feel like here in Fort Mill, a lot of the kids love going to school because it is fun. Not fun for everyone, but for a lot of the kids, it is fun. And when you can identify the fun for the kids, they want to come. And one example I just want to give, I was thinking about when she mentioned that, I have a kid at every level. And my son, I've already gone through this so many times, I wasn't going to participate in the Boost-a-thon. Comes to me yesterday telling me I need to give some money so he can get us a prize in class. And I was like, okay, I need to do that. My kid really wants this. So back to what she was saying, if the kids were coming to their parents saying, we can't go on this trip, I have this going on at school, we can't do this, I need to come to school, and getting all the teachers involved, letting them know, let's create this fun experience for them that will help drive more attendance and eliminate some of the attendance concerns within itself.
You bring up another good point that we often forget about, and this relates directly to attendance. Do this at a faculty meeting sometime when you want to have 5 minutes of fun. Ask all the staff members, all educators who obviously are school people, ask them to write down one memory that they have from their K-12 school days. Just one memory, it was a band trip, it was whatever. And I would be willing to bet you out of 100 educators, you'll get no more than 5 that write down something academic that they learned. They won't write down an algebra postulate or theorem, whatever those things were. They'll write down the band trip or the fight they got into or the game they won or the girlfriend or being a cheerleader or something. That's what we remember. And so that's what kids come to school for many times. Unfortunately, we're having to sort of trick them to come to, you got to come do the activity so you can learn. But that's what we do. And that's what works for them. So I find that fascinating. Celestine, let me ask you one more question. Can you think of you work with the teachers and the staff members on all different kind of issues. Can you think of a particular staff member that's done something really unique or effective to help kids with attendance?
I can think of a particular teacher in mind, which I would tell her, you're crossing the line a little bit here. But, it wasn't to the point where it was illegal. But I had a teacher who I know we prefer Google Voice or using a Google phone. She would use her own personal number, literally call this kid every single day before school started to check on him to make sure that he was okay, probably fed the kid. I wouldn't be surprised if she invited the kid to her house. I'm glad she didn't make that known to me, but she just went above and beyond because she understood the circumstances that this young man was going through. And it really helped get him through the academic year last year because she showed that she cared above and beyond for this one kid who ended up being a no-show. And after she reached out and did all these things, almost like a mom because he lived with the dad, it just changed his whole and he started coming to school.
You allude to a point that always has concerned me of late, and that is that the things that we used to do that we could do safely and care and appropriately. The home visit, the teacher going into the home without question, the phone calls, here's my cell phone or my phone number, call me. If a kid's hungry, we have them over for dinner. Things have changed. And unfortunately, we as educators who are trying to work on this have been deprived of some of our tools, if you will. And we understand that. I was doing some work in a school in New York City, which is the world's largest school district, and their policy was if an educator made a home visit, you took another educator with you and the SRO. You had to have 3 people, and that would kind of change the climate of a home visit, I imagine. When you bring in your officer with you, that's just a tough thing. But we've lost some of that, and we have to be very creative to come back and do with that. Let me ask you this from Fort Mill, and any one of you can respond to this. If you had a tip, something you would say to we've got 50, almost 60 people on the webinar right now. If you had something to say to these other 60 or so educators out there to help them with attendance, what would you say?
I'd probably just say, use the words of Emily and Celeste earlier, is that, just be persistent. Don't stop. I think that that's definitely helped families understand that, like, we're not going to give up on you. We're going to keep trying, and we're going to celebrate that you're here every day, and we're going to look for you when you're not here. I've got I call it my watch list. So my number of students that I look at every morning, and I click through and I find the ones that's not here, and I call their mom and I was like, did you miss the bus? You need another one? Like, where are you? That's something that we always build into our attendance plans when we're looking at students that are maybe on the line of being truant. And that is figuring out who is the point person that you're going to communicate with, and who is the person that's going to communicate with you if there's a message from the school that needs to be brought back. And I think that definitely, that caring adult, having that one person that's going to be your connection, from the school to home and home to school, I think has been something that's helped us, significantly over the last few years, for sure.
And I think in addition to that persistence, just responding quickly as soon as you see, I think all the schools in our district, on that 3rd day that you're out in a row, you're going to get a phone call from 5 different people in that building looking for you, because that's just what we do. And it's kind of, we always did that, but it's really got ingrained into our minds during that COVID time when we wouldn't see someone. On that 3rd day, we were calling, we were looking for you. We were going to find you. And so I think the persistence, but also the quick response is important.
Persistence and consistency. That's exactly right. Celestine, would you have a tip for some of the counselors out there?
I was just going to say, as a school counselor, sometimes we see things from a different perspective and not always look at it from the policy and procedure realm of things. It's very important to make sure your administration and your district is backing you and supporting the team decision, because I might feel like we should handle the situation one way, but then somebody else might feel like we should handle it a different way. And we just need to make sure we're all on the same page by communicating and talking about what's the best way to handle the situation for that student. And every situation does look different. And it's okay, sometimes you're being told, no, we're not doing it that way. Because ultimately it does fall on the lap of the principal of what's going to happen if something did go wrong with how we handle the situation.
Well, Dr. McQuay, I want to come back to you for a second. You're the principal.
Sure.
How many times a year would you mention attendance at a faculty meeting?
Well, in a faculty meeting, probably every single faculty meeting, which we only have one a month. I try not to have too many
Okay.
faculty
Okay.
meetings. But yes, I do try to mention it. And then, sometimes my quote and my signature on my email line is about attendance. It just, you just have to hit on it as much as you can, because it is so important. When you miss even 10 minutes, you're missing something.
Well, yeah, and for those of you that are in leadership roles out there, I know we've got a number of principals, assistant principals on this webinar. What gets monitored and mentioned by leaders gets attended to. I'm sure more than once somebody's walked out of one of Emily's faculty meetings saying, "Okay, that attendance is pretty important."
Mhm.
And that's what we want to happen. That's exactly it.